Legacy is not about leaving something for people. It's about leaving something behind in people. Peter Strople. Many retirees create estate plans with their attorney. They draft up this big binder of their will, their power of attorney, their healthcare directives, maybe a living trust. They get this big binder. Hopefully, they retitle their beneficiaries, and hopefully they retitle some of their assets into the name of the trust if they set up a trust. And then they throw that big binder in some safe, right? Some safe. And they tell their kids where it is. They say, hey, you know what, Johnny? The key to my safe is in my top drawer next to my bedside table. And they kind of just leave it at that. They ignore the fact that someday those documents will be read by their beneficiaries, or perhaps by a beneficiary that should have been a beneficiary, someone who's not a beneficiary. And so Warren Buffett has a different take on estate planning that we're going to dive into today. I think it could be the most important topic on estate planning that you've ever heard. Okay, so you need to stick around for this one. We're going to dive into Warren Buffett's annual Thanksgiving letter that he delivered this past November, where he gives this very important advice about your estate plan. And I'm also going to discuss 3 potential reasons why this might be hard for you to implement. Okay. And because of this, I'm going to get in front of this and give you all 5 proactive tips to make this easier to get the ball rolling. Welcome everyone to another edition of Planning for Retirement Podcast. My name is Kevin Lau. I'm your host. Not only do I host this podcast, I also run a financial planning firm, Imagine Financial Security. We specialize in helping individuals that have saved at least $1 million maximize their retirement spending, minimize their lifetime tax bill, and worry less about the financial markets. If you are interested at all about working with my firm one-on-one, we're going to include some information about that in the description of this episode. This is episode number 64. Warren Buffett says to do this with your will. And if you are new here, thank you all for joining. We appreciate all of you. If you are planning for retirement nation caliber, if you are PFR nation caliber, typically the folks that find value in our content, these are individuals that are at least over the age of 50 years old. They are not slackers by any stretch of the imagination. Many of them have at least accumulated $1 million, some of them entering the $10 million mark and anywhere in between. And these are typically folks that want to just maximize this next chapter of their life. They're trying to figure out when they can make work optional. They want to figure out when they can fire their boss. They want to figure out what to do with their 401ks, their investments, what to do about taxes in retirement. So if this is you, if you are a PFR Nation type of caliber individual, make sure to subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, and of course, follow along on podcasts if that's where you're listening to our show today. But before we get into today's topic, there is another topic I want to get into. Okay, that has been impacting the markets over the last 10 days. This is the fun part about going weekly, ladies and gentlemen, is I can not only hit the topic that we're going to talk about, but I can also hit a recent news story that I felt very, very compelled to talk about. And many of you know by now, okay, because I'm recording this the week after this story broke, but Trump announced additional tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China. Okay, and the tariffs and the information is already out there, but a lot of things have changed even since I wrote the details here for this particular podcast. But the tariffs, as Trump promised during his campaign, will be 25% duties on Canada and Mexico and 10% on China over issues of fentanyl and illegal migration. And then the energy imports from Canada will be a little lower. Instead of 25%, it'll be 10% on those particular products. Okay. And it just kind of shows you the energy interdependence, if you will, between US and Canada. And there are so many potential outcomes, okay, from tariffs. All right. I'm not going to get into what I believe is going to happen on this. I believe that's an entirely different episode in and of itself. But a few of the experts have weighed in. Okay, Yale's Budget Lab, they've offered sort of a little estimate, if you will, of some of these additional tariffs. And they translate this into a potential decline in purchasing power of about $1,250 per year for the average American family. So they're assuming essentially prices are going to go up, and so therefore purchasing power is going to go down. Ernst & Young, their chief economist, Greg Dacko, took a macroeconomic look at this and estimated that U.S. GDP would contract by 1.5% in 2025 and then 2.1% in 2026. On the other side of the ledger, a nonpartisan committee for responsible federal budget estimates that the duties are likely to raise over the coming decade if these tariffs are made permanent. Okay. This has already been bringing on additional revenue over the last few years. And Biden and his administration, they did not stop the tariffs. They continued the tariffs. In fact, more tariffs were collected under Biden's administration than Trump 1.0. And Trump, okay, he likes to tout that, tariffs don't cause inflation, they cause success. One of the quotes that I wrote down. He also points to the fact that tariffs were the greatest source of federal revenue until the federal income tax began after 1913. So for well over a century, the federal government was largely financed by tariffs, averaging about 20% plus on foreign imports. And at the end of the American Civil War, about 63% of federal income was generated by the excess taxes, okay, which exceeded 25.4% generated by tariffs. And so in 1915, during World War I, tariffs generated about 30.1% of revenues. Now, since 1935, tariff income has continued to decline, and we've sort of entered into this globalization, global trade, et cetera. Okay. There are many factors at play on this. Okay. There are definitely some industries that are going to be more impacted than others, no question. Okay. But what I want to point out about this is many of you knew this was happening. Okay. This was going to happen. Okay. When Trump was running back in 2024, he talked about tariffs. He talked about tariffs potentially replacing the income tax system. And I think a lot of people laughed about this, but I do believe he's actually genuinely serious about this one. Okay. And a big reason why Trump is hitting Canada, hitting Mexico on this tariff issue is because of the border crisis going on. Okay. But listen to this. Arrests for illegal border crossings plummeted more than 80% to about 47,000 in December. Okay, this was down from an all-time high of 250,000 for the same period 1 year earlier. So December of 2023, it was 250,000. And then December 2024, just a month after the election, it plummeted down to 47,000. Okay, so these arrests, these border incidents they're going by the wayside. Okay, people are afraid of Trump on the border. Okay, and they understand his border policies are very, very strict. So you knew you were voting for this. And I'm telling you right now, the market was ahead of this one. Okay. The market in November, if you remember the day Trump was elected, we had a nice little pop in the market, but then it kind of leveled off a little bit over the next week or two, because I think the smart money realized that the tariff thing could potentially create some short-term inflationary pressures. And inflation has been one of the top drivers for the economic uncertainty over the last couple of years. And the big thing that the markets are watching into 2025. I talked about that on the podcast earlier this year. Okay, inflation directly tied to the Fed's policy on interest rates. Tariffs will impact inflation, no question. And I understand long term, what he's trying to do is he wants to make imports more expensive so we produce more things here and create a little bit more competition to build things here so they can compete with some of these countries that are just exporting billions in dollars of goods into the US, and we're not exporting nearly the same to their country. Okay, so he's trying to cut the deficits that we have with many of these countries, and he's talking about Europe next, all right? And so I guess I say all this because I see these knee-jerk reactions in the markets when talks about tariffs are going on, okay? And what I'd caution all of you, PFR Nation, is let's let these economic policies actually play out before totally gutting your portfolio. And how about better yet, how about don't let the media play this game with you? Okay, PFR Nation, you're bright people. You're some of the best and the brightest in America. Do not let the media influence your investing decisions. The media's job is to sell fear. That is their number one job. They want to create interest. The way they create interest, they sell fear. Okay. And if you're not paying for the product, just remember this one. If you are not paying for the product, you are the product. And much of media, social media, and media in general today, most of that is free for a reason, because the way they make money is you clicking on their stuff and they sell ads to the big corporations that want to advertise to you directly. Okay. So I see all these knee-jerk reactions and it just makes me sick. And you know what actually it does? I look at buying opportunities from my clients. I say, look at all this stupid money leaving the market. let's buy up. Let's look at some of these opportunities. Let's look at Monday of this past week. Let's look at Friday of the week before. Let's look at those as buying opportunities because, we understand the fundamentals right now, long term, and how our clients' investment strategy is going to play out over the next few years from a portfolio management perspective. We see where the value is. So anytime things go on sale even more than what it is today, those are buying opportunities. So don't get caught in that. Don't get caught in the media hype around any of these tariff policies or honestly anything Trump says in general. Okay. I think, this past week he's talking about taking over the Gaza Strip. The media just goes into a frenzy about this because they know Trump sells. Trump is selling. He is making so much money for both sides in the media. Okay. So of course they're going to lean into everything he says. And so what I'm saying is take a step back, take a deep breath, turn off the news for a little bit, go outside, maybe take a walk, maybe take a little bike ride. Okay. And just kind of chill out and don't let the media totally blow up a well thought out, well diversified investment strategy. Now, of course, if you don't have a well thought out investment strategy, you have no idea what you're doing, why don't you reach out to us? We can help you with that. All right. But if you've got a beautifully diversified investment strategy that is perfectly synced up with your objectives, your financial goals, your retirement income plan, we're good. Okay. We're good. Stay disciplined. Discipline, unemotional, repeatable process. All right. End of rant on that one. All right. So why don't we get into this? All right. What is this wise advice that Warren Buffett gave last year at his annual gift to his foundations? Okay. So he writes this letter every year he gives to his foundations, billions of dollars. Okay. So we're not talking chump change here. And so he makes these gifts and he writes a letter every Thanksgiving. We'll post the letter. We'll post the one from November of 2024. And why don't we read some of the excerpts from the letter? So the annual gift to his foundations on Thanksgiving. Today, Warren Buffett will convert 1,600 Class A shares into $2.4 billion. Okay. And then 477 closed B on November 25th. That equates to $1.14 billion in order to give these B shares to our 4 family foundations. Okay. And he goes on to list the foundations. Then Buffett said this in his letter. He said, when Susie died, his first wife, her estate was roughly $3 billion. Okay. With about 96% of this sum going to our foundation for tax purposes. Okay. Because at the end of the day, his family's running the foundation. And yes, they do charitable things, but this family's getting paid by the foundation. So it's a tax efficient way to give large sums of money while still also maintaining some control of the income from those assets. But anyways, I digress. Additionally, she left $10 million to each of our 3 children, the first large gift we had given to any of them. These bequests reflected our belief that hugely wealthy parents should leave their children enough so they can do anything, but not enough that they can do nothing. Okay, and at the end of the day, Warren Buffett, he'll be giving 99.5% of his estate to charities and foundations, which the other 0.5% will go outright to his children, which, by the way, is still worth $750 million. So I don't think they're going to be hurting anytime soon, and neither will their children nor their children. Okay. But he go on to says that the benefit of being able to see the kids use the inheritance after his first wife passed away shortly after 2004. He said that the 2006 to 2024 period gave me the chance to observe each of my children in action. And they have learned much about large-scale philanthropy and human behavior. Okay. And then he has this suggestion. I have one further suggestion for all parents, whether they are of modest or staggering wealth. When your children are mature, have them read your will before you sign it. Be sure that each child understands both the logic for your decisions and the responsibilities they will encounter upon your death. If they have any questions or suggestions, listen carefully and adopt those that are found sensible. You don't want your children asking why in respect to testamentary decisions when you are no longer able to respond. Over the years, I have had questions or commentary from all 3 of my children and have often adopted their suggestions. There is nothing wrong with my having to defend my thoughts. My dad did the same with me. And he goes on to say this, Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. Over the years, Charlie and I saw many families driven apart after the posthumous dictates of the will left beneficiaries confused and sometimes angry. Jealousies, along with actual or imagined slights during childhood, become magnified, particularly when sons were favored over daughters, either in monetary ways or by positions of importance. Charlie and I also witnessed a few cases where a wealthy parent's will that was fully discussed before death helped the family become closer. What could be more satisfying? Wow. This is powerful stuff. Okay. I think, listen, we've all heard horror stories. Okay. Frankly, you've probably all had personal experiences, with maybe your parents passing or grandparents passing. Okay. Or stories from close friends or family members or relatives that passed away. And this is hitting home with y'all. Okay. I know this for a fact. I'm thinking about someone I know well. This exact thing happened where the adult children, both very responsible, sensible adults with children of their own, by the way, were left wondering, why would that be structured like this? And guess what? That person is no longer around to answer that exact question. And I know what you might be thinking, okay? This is easy for Warren Buffett to say. His kids know he's wealthy, like extremely wealthy. And they've been the beneficiary of millions of dollars of gifts already from their late mother and Buffett himself. So I'm sure money talk has always been natural with their adult children for decades. But I'm telling you right now, as someone who's been in this business, this financial planning business for nearly 17 years, this is one of the best pieces of advice that I've ever heard anyone recommend about estate planning. Okay? Because what's the worst thing that could happen? You tick off one of your adult children, right? Well, at least you can address this relationship while you're actually alive. All right. And if your estate plan is written a certain way that might tick one of them off, they're going to find out at some point anyways, okay, whether it's when you're living or when you're dead. And I just go back to exactly what he mentioned around being able to answer the objections while he still can, how important that is. And I go back to this idea of that legacy is not just what you leave behind. It's not about how much money you leave behind. It's how you're remembered, okay? The experiences, the memories, how you were as a person, how you were as a neighbor, how you were as a father or a mother or a son or a daughter or a sibling or a business person or someone in the community. Okay. But also part of how you're remembered is what kind of mess do you leave behind? All right. Are things buttoned up? Are things clear? Okay. If they're not, how does that impact how you're remembered? But I do agree. Your conversation with your adult children might not be as straightforward as this. And I believe there are 3 potential things or reasons this might be hard for you. And we're going to talk about these things. And we're also going to talk about 5 solutions to help you get this process started. So the first reason I think this might be hard is that you're struggling with this idea of transparency, okay, truthfully. Or maybe you have privacy concerns, right? Maybe, what if you've never even had a conversation about money with your adult children? How would that come across? Hey, listen, Tiffany and Tim, we're going to sit down and talk about my estate plan. That might be a little random out of left field. They might think you're on your deathbed, okay, which maybe you are, but maybe you don't want them to expect something big, right? I mean, how do you randomly broach this topic, right, without sounding morbid or again, raising any red flags about your potential health condition? Okay, so I think this whole notion of just privacy and transparency, it might just feel uncomfortable for you, okay? And it's really your own head trash, and that's okay. We're going to help you with 5 tips to get you past this. But the second reason I think this might be a challenge is, what if there's a spendthrift concern within the family, right? I mean, maybe it's one of the children. Maybe you have 3 kids and maybe 2 are just fine. They can receive any sort of inheritance outright. You have no worries. But maybe one, there's a little bit something going on. Maybe there's some alcohol abuse issues or some drug abuse issues, and a large windfall could set them back significantly. So maybe there's a spendthrift concern there. Maybe there's a spendthrift concern with one of the children's spouses. Maybe you're like, yeah, I'd love to leave $1 million to Johnny, but Johnny's wife, I don't know what's going on. She likes to blow a lot of cash. I don't know if I want to leave $1 million outright. Okay. So you might have a spendthrift concern, or you might have an issue there with one of your kids. Okay. And that's very normal. Not all families are the same. But there's one thing that is for certain. There's always issues within the family. Okay. No question. And I think the third potential issue or roadblock is that there's an issue with the relationship between your kids. Okay, maybe you have 2 or 3 kids and maybe the relationship isn't there. Something's broken for whatever reason that has never been fixed, never been addressed. So broaching a topic around estate planning with all of your children together, how is that going to go down? Okay. So I really think, it could be head trash of your own. It could be some trash within one of your kids. Okay. Something going on, or it could be something going on between your kids. Okay. And this is normal. So just know that if you didn't have any of these issues, something's wrong with your family. It's too perfect. Okay. I don't know. But I also believe that your personality preferences, your communication style, your relationship with your kids, your comfort level with their maturity to handle these important conversations are all really going to factor in. But I've got 5 specific action items that I brainstormed that I believe you can implement to make this process easier. Okay. And the first one I put down is prepare for the conversation as if you are already receiving some of the specific pushback or objections that you think you're going to receive. In other words, put yourself in your kids' shoes and or your beneficiaries' shoes. I mean, I'm not just talking about adult children here. If your beneficiaries are, let's say, your nieces and nephews, maybe you don't have children. Maybe it's your nieces and nephews, and it's the same dynamic. You're like, hey, I probably need to have a conversation about my will to my nieces and nephews because they're the primary beneficiaries. But put yourself in their shoes and ask yourself the questions that you think they might ask you. Okay? Then answer those questions. And then when you have the conversation with them, be proactive with those. Instead of waiting for your children or your beneficiaries to ask you these things, get ahead of it and say, you know what? I know you might be wondering why I did something like this, and here's why I did it. Okay? If you can be proactive with these, if you can address these objections before they come, it's going to disarm them. It's going to put them at ease. It's going to also help them understand that you understand them. You get where they're going to be coming from based on whatever it is that you did with your estate plan. Number 2, I wrote down is get your trustee or power of attorney involved. Maybe it's one of your adult children. Maybe it's a sibling. Okay. Have the conversation with them first and say, hey, you know what? I'm thinking about setting up a little family meeting to have this conversation about my will, about my estate plan. And I want everyone to be bought in. I want everyone to know what their roles are and what their roles are not. And share with that individual or those individuals, it could be more than one person, why you are struggling with this. And ask them, hey, if you were me, how would you approach this conversation? Okay. There's a reason you chose those individuals as a trustee, as an executor, as a power of attorney. And you know what? They're going to be in that position to make those decisions for you. It's probably nice if they know that you're kind of teeing this conversation up for them. There's nothing worse than being named as a power of attorney or an executor. And all of a sudden you have to step in and all of the other siblings are like, why were you named? What? And then now you're the bad guy. So they're probably like, oh, thank the Lord. You're going to have this conversation proactively as opposed to reactively from me. Much better off being proactive with this and ask them, hey, listen, there's a reason I chose you to do this. What are your thoughts? How would you address this conversation? Number 3, just have the mindset that you don't need to share more than you want to share. Like sharing your will doesn't necessarily meaning you're sharing your financial statements or you're showing them your balance sheet. Okay, a will or even a trust is generally stated in terms of percentages because the dollar amounts will absolutely change over time unless you're leaving a specific bequest to a charity or to one of the beneficiaries. But in general, if you're having a conversation with your adult children, it's most likely that the estate is divided by a percentage for each of those children. So don't worry about sharing the numbers if you're not ready for that yet, okay? Ease into this conversation. If you're ready to share the numbers and you want to share the numbers, that's fine, okay? At the end of the day, though, at some point, they're going to find out what they're getting from a dollar perspective. And you also don't want it to be like a huge surprise, all right? I'm thinking about some clients in the past that I've worked with that I've always been kind of thinking like, hey, does your son or daughter know they're going to inherit $10 million each? Like, that's probably a conversation you want to have. If you have a $20 million estate and you're going to split it between your 2 kids for $10 million each, they better be ready to handle that, okay? Because there is a lot of pressure on the beneficiaries to not squander the wealth that you've worked hard to build. And so if it's a large windfall, you probably do want to have some proactive conversations. And that actually leads me to number 4, the tip. Do some lifetime gifting. Do what Buffett did, or do what his wife did, I should say. Susie left $10 million for each kid. And ultimately, he was able to see how they used that money for over the last 18 years. So doing some lifetime gifting, give with a warm hand as opposed to a cold one. See what they do with it. Ask them what they're going to do with the gifts. You're going to learn a lot about whether or not your estate plan is on point based on their decisions on what they're doing with the money. Okay. I have a client who's gifting an annual amount to each of their daughters. Over the years, she's been doing this. And you know what? She's recently doubled it because they're doing such great things with the money. They're helping their children. They're putting their kids through college. Okay. They're doing great things with the money. I guarantee you, if they were squandering the money or buying frivolous things, they wouldn't have doubled those annual gifts. So do some lifetime gifting and kind of see what your beneficiaries would do with the money. And the last tip I'm going to throw out, and I'm going to throw myself under the bus and all of my colleagues, is get your financial advisor involved. It's so much easier to kind of put the blame on your advisor for doing certain things. Like, hey, my advisor wants to have a family meeting about my will or my estate plan, or my advisor suggests that I set things up like this because here are our goals. So much easier to kind of defer the blame. And you know what? This is why we get paid. What we get paid is we're supposed to be having these hard conversations with our clients, with their loved ones, because at the end of the day, I want to be responsible for helping that legacy continue on after my clients are no longer here. So part of my job, in my opinion, is to engage these conversations with their adult children. I do this all the time with clients. Have conversations with their adult children. And frankly, a lot of them actually end up becoming clients too, because they know that, hey, listen, mom or dad works for you, they trust you. And, generally I'm typically the age of a lot of their adult children. So they're like, hey, we can continue to work together when mom and dad are no longer here. And that's a big reason clients love to hire us as their advisors, because they have a partner that they can work with, not only during their lifetime, but also multiple generations to come. But put the blame on your advisor as to why you want to set this conversation up, as to why you did things a certain way. Now, at the end of the day, if you're totally disinheriting one of your kids and then you're going to put that blame on your advisor, that's probably not super fair. But maybe you structured your estate plan a certain way because some of your fair doesn't always mean equal. Maybe some of your beneficiaries potentially could need the money a little bit more when you're no longer here versus other beneficiaries. And having that conversation proactively when you're alive and you can address those questions, address those concerns, and having a third party like a financial advisor, or even the attorney. If the attorney is willing to have this conversation, God bless them. Most attorneys that I know that do this for a living, they're not really involved in these family meeting conversations, but have these conversations not only with your adult children, but loop in your advisor, loop in your trusted advisors, because they most likely know your financial situation truthfully better than you know your own situation. Okay. They've seen it in the lens from your perspective, but they also see it through a different lens, through a lens of actual practice in financial planning, hopefully for decades. And they can sort of help share that wisdom with you as you're preparing for these conversations. So even if it's not the advisor is in the room, leverage your advisor, ask them for their advice. Say, hey, listen, I really want to have this proactive conversation with my adult children about my will, about my estate plan. I just don't know where to start. Engage your advisor. They will have some great insights, hopefully, to get you started. So, listen, I know these subjects, I know these conversations, these are touchy subjects, all right? We're advocating you having a conversation with your kids about what happens when you're dead. It's just uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable just thinking about this conversation I'm going to have with my kids when they're adults. But just remember, legacy is not just about how much you leave, but it's about how you are remembered. And just having your estate documents signed off doesn't mean that answers or solves for the how you are remembered question. Just leaving, a few $100,000 in your will to one of your adult children, that's not going to fix your relationship. Okay. And so understand that your experiences with your kids, the memories that your kids are going to have of you, think about the positive impact you want to make in your community. Okay. But don't act like estate planning is simply signing off on some paperwork and changing your beneficiary designations and retitling some of your assets. It's not. It's going to require some heavy lifting on your part. But I 1000% agree with Warren Buffett's advice and Charlie's advice. I've personally seen families ripped apart because of failing to plan for this and failing to have these conversations with their beneficiaries. And I do not want you, I care about all of you. Many of you are clients or listeners, and I don't want you to have the same thing happen to your family. And listen, if you want help with your own financial planning, if you've been listening to the show and you're like, listen, I'd love to kind of figure out, hey, what would it be like to work with Kevin and his team? We have a retirement readiness questionnaire. You could start there. We'll put it in the description, in the show notes. Start at the retirement readiness questionnaire. It's just some basic information about you, what you're looking to accomplish, a little bit about your financial situation. And I'll follow up with a personalized short video recording about your situation, some of my initial thoughts, how we would help you if we were to work together, and more importantly, if we're a good mutual fit. And we would love to help you. This is what we do for a living. We'd love to help you in your financial planning journey, your planning for retirement journey, because we just get a kick out of what we do. And as always, if you're finding value in the content, make sure to leave that 5-star review. If you found this content to be helpful, it helps us reach more people. And of course, share this with someone you care about. Share this with someone else who you think this message would resonate with. I guarantee you they will be grateful for that. And so we appreciate all of you. Thank you for all the 5-star reviews. Thank you for all the new followers that we have in our ecosystem. We also have some great whiteboard fireside chats on YouTube that are popping up. One of which that was just released last week, 3 reasons retirees underspend. So it's dovetailing off this idea of giving yourself a raise. And so make sure to check out that video. I thought it was really, really good, and hopefully it's helpful. But until next time, this is Kevin Lau signing off.